Here we are in VS Code, and let's start a new folder for our Flask app. So I'm going to put it here under this My Scripts folder, and then we'll just create a new folder. Let's call it Flask Project, and I'll select that folder. So now every file that we open up in there will be in our VS Code, or we can create files in there. And let's create a few files. First of all, let's create app.py. It doesn't have to be named this, but this is kind of the standard for Flask apps, to have our main app be called app.py. Next, let's create a folder, and this will be called templates. Let's create another folder called, not under templates, but at the same level as templates, called static. And we won't use this right now, but I want to show you that folder as well. So generally, these are the only folders you really need. You don't even necessarily need all of them, but if you start with these, you can do a lot of powerful things in Flask. So app.py is where our Python logic will go to actually run the app and start the web server, start the server that creates a web page for us that we can access. And then templates, that's where we can put our HTML templates. So if we have like a index.html or home.html page, then we can put those in templates. So that's where they can be located. And static is where we can put things like JavaScript or CSS. And we can, if you're familiar with HTML, which I admit I'm not the biggest expert on that, but I've used it my fair share of it. We can put those into static, and those resources can be used in our app. If we want to use a lot of JavaScript or CSS, then static is where those files could go. And we can reference all that as we go along. For now, let's work on app.py. So first of all, we need to import Flask, install Flask rather. So pip install Flask. Okay, so now we've got Flask. We've installed that third-party library. We can now use it. So let's, from Flask, import Flask and render templates. These are the things we'll be using from Flask here. I'm also going to be importing random, which is a built-in module we've used before. And I'll show you why here shortly. But first, let's create our app. So app, we'll assign that to Flask and then name. And then if we go to, let's input some quotes here. So what we're going to make is a website that shows us a bunch of different quotes. And let me copy paste here this quote list. I don't want you to have to watch me type this all out. So we just have a list of all of our quotes, and we're going to put these on our web page and cycle through them. Okay. So there's our quotes. Now let's just create our app route. So app.routes / that's going to decorate our index function. And this is just going to be our home, our main page. So let's select a quote, random.choice from quotes. It will select a random quote from our quotes, a random item from that list. And then we return render template index.html and then quote equals quote. So we're passing in to our index.html page, we're passing in this Python variable. We're calling it quote. So quote within index.html will reference this quote. That's why we have quote equals quote there. One references what gets passed into index.html. One references what's in our main Python program here. We could say like whatever we want to use in index.html as the name, we could change that. And like my quotes equals quote if we wanted, but we'll keep it at quote. So that's pretty much it. So if name equals main app.run. So we're running our Flask app. And this part here, it's just something standard. As we said, that's just what Flask looks for, right? That's how we create the app, the Flask object, if you will. So one thing that we're missing still is this index.html. Where is Flask going to get that? Well, with render template, it automatically looks in templates. So let's create a file in templates called index.html. And then we can modify that. And I have some code for you here and I will provide these in the resources. But this isn't an HTML class or CSS or JavaScript. It's a Python class. So I don't want you to have to consume yourself with learning all of this. Maybe you know some HTML. As a brief overview, this is just how web pages work. And there are different sections to indicate different things. This style section is CSS. And that indicates how we want some of the things that we want our page to look like. And the body is our main component here. And we have two things we're doing. I want to show you this part in a bit. But the first part is we're just creating a paragraph format in HTML. It's how HTML understands how to display things with all these tags, right? And with JavaScript and CSS. And we have two curly brackets, and then our quote variable and two closing curly brackets. Those curly brackets are important. Whatever is in those, Flask is going to populate with the things that we're passing in. So quote, that is referencing this quote. So let's save this, and let's save our app.py, and let's run it. I'm running our app.py. We see red, but that's okay. That's just a warning saying you shouldn't use this in production. And here we see it's running on HTTP and then this address, our home address. Whoops, I pressed Control-C when I meant to copy, and that quit. So let's run it again. Okay, then we'll open this up in a web page. All right, so we've got this page here, and every time we refresh it, it will give us a new quote. This one is success usually comes to those who are too busy to be looking for it. Refresh, get busy living, or get busy dying. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. So every time we refresh, we just get a new quote. And also, if we make this a little smaller, we see every time we refresh this page, we get a new entry down here. We're running a new get with Flask. So if we see that, we're just kind of moving up. So I want to show you as well, if we change this to my quotes, save it, then let's go change it to index.html. Well, let's run this, watch what happens. We need to stop our server. There we go, and then run it again. See, now we're not working. because we changed that to my quote. So let's change index.html to my quote. I just want to demonstrate what that name is referencing. So let's stop, Control C, and then I've saved our page. Let's run it again and see we're working again. So that first my quote, that just references the name of the variable that we want to reference in our HTML. And remember these curly brackets. So next, let's add a little bit more. Let's add a for loop into our Flask app. So we can do for loops. And how we do that is these curly braces and then a % . They're kind of like the same way that HTML tags work. We've got our start and our end. Whereas with HTML tags, it's these carets and the name of the tag, and then the end tag would be a caret / and the name of the tag. That shows that we're at the end. So everything within that is our body, for example. But here, everything within these is the start of our for loop. Everything within these is the end of our for loop. And everything in the middle of end for and for will loop. So we're going to create list items. This is HTML in part of an ordered list underneath our header 2 that says all quotes, and we're going to list out every quote. So you'll notice we have my quotes. Let's call this daily quote. And then we have quotes. And then we say for quote and quotes. So we need a quotes variable. Let's go to app. So I want this to be called daily quote. Will be assigned quote, that random quote. But we can also pass in all quotes equals quotes, because quotes is the name of our list. So I hope that is making some sense of how we're naming these things and how we can reference them. Yeah, and this is called the Jinja templating language, by the way, with these brackets. If we may talk more about that later in the course, but that's called Jinja, Jinja. And so we could look that up if you're more interested in that. But let's abort this and run our Flask app again, and let's see what our page looks like. All quotes. So something is not working. We're not seeing our list. Let's troubleshoot this. All quotes. Oh, I believe we should not have a space there when we're inputting as arguments named variables. So let's save that. Let's try that again. That might have been the issue. So run. Nope, that wasn't the issue. That may just be a convention thing. So let's look here. For quotes, in quotes, print quotes. Or quote in quotes. Let's print quote as a list item. We have daily quote. Oh, we put all quotes. All quotes. This is good troubleshooting. So for quote. For quote and all quotes. That's what this page, this HTML page, sees as our variable that Flask can use for it. So now let's run it. Oh, we need to Control C and then run it again. There we go. There's our quotes, guys. So we have our daily quote and we have all quotes. If we keep refreshing, we'll refresh our daily quote. And then we can just read all of our quotes if we wanted. So you can see a lot of potential applications here, creating our own web page. The more we know about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the more we can do. Right here, we have in our index.html, we have our CSS, our style within the HTML page. We could use we could put a CSS file in static and reference that with some simple Googling that we could learn how to do that. We could put more JavaScript in there. We could make this page interactive and just render HTML and all the things we want. But the value here is that we can also input our Python. We can use Python with this. So your imagination is your playground, and we're now able to create simple, well, even quite complex websites with the Flask framework. So I hope that was an enjoyable exercise to you, and now you can play around with that and add Flask to your toolkit. Awesome.